Every morning I've woken up as Prime Minister. I've been inspired by the resilience, the generosity, and the determination of Canadians.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're breaking down the factors on both sides of the political aisle that led Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to announce his resignation in January 2025.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process.
Number 10. Broken campaign promises.
Too many people are falling through the cracks. Parents and children who have to spend the night at the ER because they don't have a family doctor. Injured workers who can't afford the medicine they need to get back on their feet. Teenagers struggling with mental illness who don't know there are professionals who can help.
From the time of Trudeau's rise to power in 2015, and even earlier, he was touted as the future of the Liberal Party of Canada. This was largely due to a number of policies and forward-thinking ideas proposed by Trudeau prior to taking office. A few of these actually did come to pass, like the nationwide legalization of cannabis and putting plans in place for affordable childcare.
We will start with an investment of $6 billion over the next 4 years to support a stronger Medicare system and public health care.
However, Canadians were spurned by several more promises that never materialized. These included measures to lower the overall cost of prescription drugs and to ensure that the wealthiest people in Canada would no longer be able to exploit loopholes to dodge taxes.
We're trying to ensure that folks who are successful are paying their fair share, and it's not fair that people who are wealthy have tax rules that they can get out of paying as many taxes and as much tax as middle-class families. And that's something that goes to the heart of fairness.
Number 9. Energy policies.
A new Liberal government will make historic investments to strengthen the middle class, create jobs, and grow our economy. That includes a historic plan to improve public infrastructure to get people working, to build better cities and communities, and to improve our health, well-being, and quality of life.
For some, Trudeau is a climate crusader who leaves a respectable legacy when it comes to the environment. Said Carolyn Brouillette, Executive Director of Climate Action Network Canada, quote, "The past 10 years have seen a revolution in how we tackle climate change," end quote. Trudeau has also been painted as an enemy of the Canadian oil and gas industry, despite numerous concessions to them during his time in power.
We'll also develop new ways to finance construction and establish innovative methods to get more projects off the ground. And we'll work with provinces and territories to develop a national energy strategy with the goals of securing and storing energy and promoting green, renewable energy sources.
Heather Exner-Pirot, Special Advisor on Energy to the Business Council of Canada, said that, quote, "The Liberal government under Prime Minister Trudeau has made Canada's oil and gas sector uncompetitive. So there is some optimism now that Canada will finally be a place that's open for business," end quote. Oil and gas stocks reportedly rose the day that Trudeau announced his resignation.
It's an investment of almost $6 billion over the next 4 years, and almost $20 billion over the next decade in green infrastructure.
Number 8. Relationship with the provinces.
How are you going to keep provinces accountable when it comes to how they spend healthcare dollars?
This is something we're actually approaching based on the success of our childcare deals. We knew that different provinces across the country had very different approaches to delivering childcare in their country, in their regions.
Given Trudeau's rulings on energy, you can imagine that he wasn't particularly popular in certain western provinces, such as Alberta and Saskatchewan. However, perceived government overreach became so egregious that in April 2024, the premiers of Canada's 13 provinces sent Prime Minister Trudeau an open letter detailing their concerns with elements of that year's federal budget.
We set out clear metrics. We needed to see half price reduction in childcare fees in the first year, getting to $10 a day childcare within 5 years. how they worked on that, how many spaces they added to, how they were going to ensure that we're properly paying early childhood educators. Those were all things that we negotiated bilaterally.
Written by Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston, the letter cautioned Trudeau that, quote, the federal government must refrain from overreaching into provincial and territorial jurisdiction, particularly in the areas of health, education, and housing. Trudeau's response, that he would go around the provinces if he had to, was criticized for being out of touch.
What we are going to do the work right now with provinces on is sitting down with them and saying, okay, what is your target for access to primary care physicians? Do you want to get to 95% of your residents with primary care physicians? Are you going to be satisfied with 90 or even just 75?
Number 7, increased national debt.
The servicing costs on the debt that you're going to have to carry, that you're adding to now, right?
Interest rates are at historic lows, Glenn.
Okay, but it's still a lot of money.
No.
It's still a lot of money.
No.
And you don't know where. Okay, but how are you going to pay for that? How are you going to pay for those costs in future years? Are you going to increase taxes, or are you going to cut programs?
It's fair to say that in 2025, the general public is fed up. That is to say, fed up with high prices on groceries, unaffordable housing, a sagging economy, and an increasingly uncertain future. Countless Canadians are frustrated with the federal government's response to this, as well as a failure to implement measures that would curb these problems. So with that in mind, you can understand why the national debt is a particularly sore point.
Right now, we're in an absolutely unprecedented situation where our economy had to completely shut down. And the government chose to and needed to be there for people while they lost their paychecks.
According to the Financial Post, the national debt had already ballooned to $616 billion before Trudeau took office. As reported by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, the debt had doubled to $1.232 trillion in August of 2024. It's been calculated that the debt will cost taxpayers $847 billion over the next decade plus, or more than $18,000 for every Canadian.
We have been absolutely transparent every step of the way about these investments we're making for Canadians, about how we are supporting millions of Canadians, millions of people, thousands upon thousands of small businesses across this country get through this unprecedented time.
Number 6, lack of progress on reconciliation.
Thank you to the Niagara Indigenous community and the grandmothers who invited me to be part of today's sunrise ceremony and the sharing circle with survivors. I heard stories this morning of the horrors and pains of residential schools.
As hard as it is to believe now, Trudeau was once seen as the face of a new generation of Canadian leadership. One tall order that the Prime Minister was faced with was helping to make reparations with Indigenous communities across the country, which would be a major milestone of implementing his agenda. Trudeau is met with a decidedly mixed reception from these communities.
As we reflect on truth and reconciliation, it's not just a thing of the past. It has articulations today and challenges that families are facing, challenges that communities are facing, and challenges that we are all facing.
On the one hand, they feel that he is the most progressive Prime Minister to date with regard to Indigenous issues. On the other, First Nations peoples have also called Trudeau out for being all talk and little action, such as when he, according to the Winnipeg Free Press, quote, failed to meet promised on-reserve housing and infrastructure commitments.
How many times do Indigenous peoples need to tell their stories of trauma, of loss, of pain, of grief, until we absorb those stories as non-Indigenous people and make them our own, because they too are the story of Canada, and therefore they too are the story of each of us.
Number 5, his privileged background.
Is there anything you've learned from the experiences that both your parents have gone through?
But nothing I should talk about on camera, I think.
Even if you don't follow Canadian politics, you'll likely still have heard of the Prime Minister's father, Pierre Trudeau. The elder Trudeau served as Prime Minister of Canada from 1968 to 1979, then again from 1980 to 1984. Pierre remains one of the most revered Canadian Prime Ministers in history. but it could be argued that this has helped and hurt his son.
Well, there's a lot of bleeding hearts around who just don't like to see people with helmets and guns. All I can say is go on and bleed, but it's more important to keep law and order in this society than to be worried about weak-kneed people who don't like the looks of a soldier.
At any cost? At any cost? How far would you go with that? How far would you extend that?
Well, just watch me.
Not only is Justin constantly compared to his late father, but Pierre's powerful position meant that the current prime minister grew up in a world of wealth and privilege, attending expensive private schools. Many have argued that this places Trudeau at a considerable distance from the average Canadian and thus renders him unfit to lead.
Everyone's got peer pressure at this age. I mean, there's pressure to smoke, there's pressure to do all sorts of stuff. And I've never been affected by peer pressure. Never.
Number 4, COVID-19 pandemic response.
The last 6 months have laid bare fundamental gaps and inequities within our societies and between them. As with climate change, those who have the least are impacted the most.
Admittedly, there are a number of things to credit Trudeau for with regard to his handling of the COVID pandemic on Canadian soil. These include temporarily raising childcare benefits and waiving student loan payments. Trudeau's crowning achievement during the pandemic was the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or CERB, which provided unemployed Canadians with $2,000 a month for a time. However, not everyone was raving over Trudeau's handling of COVID.
While scientists work around the clock to develop a vaccine, as governments, we have the responsibility to ensure it'll be distributed quickly and fairly around the world. On Friday, I announced that Canada will provide $440 million to the COVID-19 Vaccine Global Access Facility, including $220 million to the Advanced Market Commitment to help low and middle-income countries access vaccines.
Among certain more conservative groups, a sentiment emerged that Trudeau's vaccine mandates and lockdowns constituted a form of overreach. This resulted in the Canada Convoy protest, in which truckers affected by travel restrictions converged on Parliament Hill in Ottawa to rail against the federal government.
I dare say that citizens of Ottawa are used to political activity and protests on the Hill on a range of things. But this was present and in their daily lives and disrupting their weekend in a way that wasn't a usual political protest.
Number 3, electoral reform, or lack thereof.
If I have one regret, particularly as we approach this election, well, there are probably many regrets that I will think of, but I do wish that we'd been able to change the way we elect our governments in this country so that people could simply choose a second choice or a third choice on the same ballot.
During Trudeau's speech announcing his resignation, the Prime Minister acknowledged and expressed regret for his failure to implement electoral reform, a hallmark of his 2015 leadership campaign. This would have entailed a total revamping of the Canadian electoral system. According to writer Patrice Dutil, this would require Canada to, quote, replace its traditional system of voting with a proportional system of representation, where seats in the House of Commons would be allocated according to the proportion of votes each party received, end quote.
There is no consensus. There is no clear path forward. It would be irresponsible for us to do something that harms Canada's stability when, in fact, what we need is moving forward on growth for the middle class and support.
Trudeau proposed that this be put to a referendum. While it's unclear exactly how this would have played out, a number of Canadians feel that this is another example of Trudeau failing to live up to his word.
People would have been looking for things they have in common instead of trying to polarize and divide Canadians against each other. I think in this time, figuring out how to pull together and find common ground remains something that is really important for democracies. But I could not change unilaterally without support of other parties our electoral system. That wouldn't have been responsible.
Number 2, Blackface Scandal.
When Justin Trudeau next faces reporters and Canadian voters, the whole country will likely be leaning in. There is a major new development this hour as the Liberal leader and his advisors are deciding the next move. Another image of Trudeau wearing what appears to be blackface. It is the 4th similar image now to have come to light in the past 24 hours.
Oof, where to begin with this one? No one ever expects a lot of excitement out of Canadian elections, But things took a turn for the worse and just plain cringeworthy in 2019. On September 18th of that year, old photos emerged in Time magazine of Trudeau in full blackface and brownface makeup. That's right, that wasn't just once, this was multiple times.
Last night, in speaking to reporters, Trudeau was asked directly whether there were any other incidents. He'd already apologized for one when he was a high school teacher. Under questioning from reporters, though, notably our David Cochrane, he revealed a second when he was a high school student. But when he was asked if there were any other incidents of his wearing black or brown face, Trudeau did not directly say.
Trudeau sheepishly attempted to explain this bizarre lapse in judgment away, expressing that, quote, "It was something that I didn't think was racist at the time, but now I recognize it was something racist to do," end quote. While the revelation didn't seem to affect the Liberals' performance in the subsequent election, it did far-reaching damage to Trudeau's progressive public image.
Justin Trudeau, in brown and blackface, we've seen a number of examples. Do you consider it to be racist?
Yeah, it's racist beyond any doubt. Ask people of color growing up across this country, and they'll share with you why it's offensive. Pulling from my own personal experience as a Sikh Punjabi kid growing up in Brampton, we used to see incidents of folks knocking turbans off.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Number 1. Ethics violations.
It was important for Jody Wilson-Raybould to speak openly at the Justice Committee today, and I'm glad she had the chance to do so. I strongly maintain, as I have from the beginning, that I and my staff always acted appropriately and professionally.
For all of Prime Minister Trudeau's public-facing commitments to systemic change, his time in office was marred by significant ethics scandals. The Globe and Mail reported that Trudeau had allegedly leaned on the office of the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada to drop an investigation into Montreal-based construction company SNC-Lavalin. The following year saw Trudeau investigated for uncomfortably close ties to We Charity and a series of payments to him and his family.
I made a mistake in not recusing myself immediately from the discussions, given our family's history, and I'm sincerely sorry.
While he was cleared of wrongdoing in the latter case, an ethics investigation found that in the case of SNC-Lavalin, Trudeau had indeed violated the Conflict of Interest Act.
I want to be absolutely clear here. The decision around SNC-Lavalin was Ms. Wilson-Raybould's and hers alone. I want to confirm this again for Canadians, as Ms. Wilson-Raybould herself confirmed today. This decision is the Attorney General's alone.
What do you think of the Prime Minister's decision to step down? Be sure to let us know in the comments below.
And Canadians deserve a real choice in the next election. And it has become obvious to me with the internal battles that I cannot be the one to carry the Liberal standard into the next election.
Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from WatchMojo, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.